It's making the world insane. It's making politics crazier and crazier. It's causing people to feel that in order to exist, they need to get higher numbers online, and they get on this hamster wheel where they're posting and posting and posting, and to get attention, and ultimately that doesn't work.
Jaron Lanier was literally the creator of virtual reality. He's one of the early savants of the Silicon Valley who were really sort of pioneering the technologies that we are trying to understand now. But very quickly, Jaron Lanier, back in 1995, already began to be a kind of dissenter, a warning voice. And while he continues as the prime unifying scientist in Microsoft, he's a loud and clear voice coming from within the very belly of technological change, saying that these technologies have to have a human guiding hand because otherwise they truly can manifest like nuclear power. He says that there is no AI, that AI is something that is in human control. He also says something very provocative, which is that at a time when even the creators of AI and other technologies, we're not even talking about gene editing or quantum, and all of that will unveil itself for the rest of the day. But what he's been saying is that it's not that it's some Hollywood metaphor, where Terminator will come and kill everybody. It's not those kind of things, but that there's a line building up in our societies now where these technologies could drive us insane. And I'd love to ask him what he means by that. And when we are talking about mysteries, I'll just leave one other fact with us when we were talking with Swamiji about the sheer mystery of consciousness, that the universe itself, and our next speaker will address that, 96% of the universe we don't know anything about. We know 4% of it, which is atomic matter. 99.99% of that atomic matter is interstellar dust. We only know 0.1% of the universe. So there's lots of mysteries to unfold, lots of new editions of Synapse to do over the years. And ladies and gentlemen, Jaron Lanier, again, is somebody who was trying to make it but could not, but he's another mind that I did not want to lose out on. So he's on Zoom, but it's a bit apt because he was the creator of virtual reality. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jaron Lanier on the screen. Thank you.
I am Iron Man.
LGBTQ youth in particular are drawn to making friends online.
3 medium-cheese pizzas.
पूरा देश आपको देख रहा है, पूरा भारत आपको देख रहा है.
इस वीडियो को लाइक करें, हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें.
I'm now married to my Tinder date.
How we found each other is purely an act of God.
High social media use with these high levels of anxiety and depression.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be. I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news,
Sir.
He is responsible for the degradation that we see somewhat of our democracy.
Okay, male or female?
Neither. They, them.
Sites like Facebook and Twitter are dopamine farms that are reprogramming how you think and feel. They're also causing political instability and are changing the global economy for the worse.
CEOs of the largest social media companies faced a bipartisan grilling during a Senate hearing.
Mr. Zuckerberg, what the hell were you thinking?
Your product is killing people.
I know you don't mean it to be so, but you have blood on your hands.
Will you set up a victims' compensation fund with your money?
So Big Tech's recent rally has added around $2 trillion in market value.
Addictive features, suicides, bullying, and eating disorders.
What's amazing is that just this one technology seems to have made every layer of life worse.
Tell me why we should unplug. Tell me why we should delete our social media accounts.
Hi, Jaron. Thank you for joining. We're all good. Looking forward to the session with you, Jaron. We just showed a pretty dark film, which is a kind of, it's a kind of explanation of the underbelly of all the shiny technologies that we are submitting to, and that we absolutely don't want to give up the conveniences of, and all the connectivities and the pleasures and entertainment, but this dark underbelly layer of it that you have been trying to warn. So, Jaron, I'd like to actually, before we come into the whole AI conversation, I want to take us back to the previous milestone of technological change, which was social connectivity, the social media companies. And you came up with this fascinating acronym, BUMMERS, behaviors of users modified and made into empires of rent. And as I said, back in 1995, when it was barely beginning, you already wrote a book called The Agents of Alienation, where you were prophesying some of this. So tell us, Jaron, what has gone wrong with this kind of technological utopia that we were all rushing towards? What is the heart of what's going wrong with this?
I am very, very happy to answer your question, but would it be okay if I said something less dark first?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I just feel, especially for young people, we should also be able to talk about things that are good. And I wanted to just add a little bit to the previous speaker, if I could.
Of course. Absolutely.
I wanted to say a little bit about virtual reality that I was thinking about when I was listening to that lovely talk. I hope this is okay. I don't mean to undo your question. I promise you I will answer your question.
No, Jaron, it's totally fine. Please go ahead.
Okay. So in virtual reality, and you just had a very dark images of virtual reality in this video, including somebody with dreadlocks torturing somebody, which, I mean, okay, fine. Fair. And
but I'm going to explain that film, but first comment on Swamiji's talk.
Okay,
What were you going to
so
say?
let's say you're wearing the virtual reality glasses, and you can change more than people usually realize. You can change your perception of your own body. You can add limbs that your brain knows how to operate. You can add a tail, you can add extra arms. You can, I suppose, a Hindu deity, you can learn to control these arms. Your brain has that in it. You can change the flow of time. You can change your perception of what is you and what is the world, because you can make parts of the world responsive to you. You can spread yourself out into pieces and experience that, and you can experience essentially sharing bodies with others. But so you can get to the point of very radical experience. But here's the thing that I find interesting. As you change everything, there's still this thing that remains through it, and that's your consciousness. So I like to think of virtual reality as a consciousness noticing machine, rather than and materializing everything and making us forget consciousness. It can go in exactly the opposite direction and help us notice consciousness. So I have to say that in the world in which I live, in Silicon Valley, this perspective of treating consciousness as real is unusual. However, it seems to me that the technology shows us that it is real. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. What would it be doing otherwise? So I wanted to add that. And now I'm ready to become entirely dark for your pleasure and talk about how horrible so many things are. So
wait, just hold on for 1 minute, Jaron. I just wanted one clarity. I want to put out two clarities. One, I wanted to just recapture what you just said about wearing a VR glass, and that you can make your brain respond to limbs that don't exist, that it could control a tail.
Yes, that's very true. there's a whole discipline that studies that now. So we can, it started 40 years ago and we discovered that you could do this, but now it's become an academic study with many interesting researchers and conferences. It's a whole world of things. So what we believe is that as the brain evolved through many, many creatures over billions of years, it retained essentially traces of the bodies of the creatures it had previously controlled. And furthermore, there's a thing called pre-adaptation, which is the creatures that you can potentially evolve into hundreds of millions of years in the future. So the brain is not solely designed for humans. It's a sort of one moment in a procession of evolution through many, many different creatures. And we're part of a very long cosmic process. We're not the only thing in the universe. We're not the end. We're just one little point along the way. And once you understand the brain that way, it becomes less surprising that the brain still knows how to be a fish and the brain still knows how to have a tail and all of these things. And so what we can do in virtual reality is you can change your body, and then as you move your real body, it's moved into that creature, and you can see the creature by looking down or looking in a mirror or various other ways. And then your brain suddenly remembers how to be this other body. Yeah.
Wow. That's insane. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. So, I mean, you're going to take me down the path I wasn't planning, but just let me add on a couple of questions there.
Okay, sure.
Does that mean that when you said that we are part of this whole cosmic, long journey, passing through many creatures in many phases, this brain, whatever it is, and I think if Swamiji would be here, he'd say, what is this traveling consciousness that's passing through many creatures? But we'll leave that for the moment. Are you then
it's
also...
possible he would ask that, yes.
Yes. I'm totally being taken down another part, but what would your answer be to that? If he asked you, what is that?
Well, there's something, I want to point out something here, which is what I have just been telling you is actually not poetry, but science, because it's something where we can formulate experiments and falsify hypotheses and repeat results. And so thus far, what I've told you is science, not poetry about becoming different animals. It's called homuncular flexibility or plasticity. The homunculus is this idea of the map of the body inside the brain, and I'm doing this with my hands because the body is kind of stretched over the brain, and there are different regions that are specialized to parts of the body, and that's this thing called the homunculus. And so we're actually talking about a scientific thing here, not a poetic thing. As soon as we talk about what it is that's moving through deep time, the scientific answer is a materialist answer, which is it's the pattern that's evolution is acting on of the brain, how the phenotype and the genotype interact in order for the brain to change over time through processes that, in my view, we don't totally understand, but at least involve various forms of selection along the lines of Darwin. But I think also it's gotten the picture has become increasingly more complex as people observe it more. At any rate, if you ask, so now leaving the science aside, there's pure experience, which is, as I say, as you do these very radical experiences, there's still this thing that continues. And what can that be other than consciousness? And indeed, the whole idea of virtual reality, we have to ask the question, if you don't think consciousness exists, how can virtual reality even be a thing, right? I mean, it's in a way so obvious that it's easy to miss, right? Because the only audience that is there has to be consciousness. What else could it be? Otherwise, the technology couldn't even be a thing.
But there, I don't think anyone's denying that there is consciousness. That nobody is denying. I think everyone's trying to say, what is this mystery figure?
They do. Okay, I mean, all the time. It's being called an illusion. So there's a very interesting subtlety I want to bring up about consciousness that has a kind of a political and economic meaning now that might be different from in the past. And here I might say something that not everyone will agree with. So one of the issues we have is that with AI programs, which I'm obviously very involved with, that's my day job, more or less. That's what we're doing. And we can simulate all kinds of things. We can simulate writing and art and all of these things. And so the question becomes, if you can simulate a person, what is the difference between the person and your simulation? That's the central idea of artificial intelligence, is that there is no difference. But then you run into a very interesting economic and political problem, which is, if the reason we do technology is to benefit people, but now people aren't special anymore, is there any way to even have technology be defined in any sensible way, or have we lost ourselves in total absurdity? And that's an extremely important, yeah, so it's an extremely important question. So it used to be that you could say, well, the thing that makes the person special, so that the person can be the beneficiary of technology, so that it's possible to even talk about technology in a way that makes any sense at all. What makes the person special is a biological thing, that the person is made of cells and was born to a mother and whatever set of qualities you could come up. Or you could say it's that the person has certain intellectual capabilities and can do certain things, maybe that animals cannot. Or you can say the person.
Now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing is, as soon as you define technology as something that simulates all of those things, those all go away. So the thing about consciousness is that if you don't believe in consciousness, you can no longer believe in technology, because you can no longer believe that there's such a thing as a specialness to people that would allow you to identify people as the beneficiaries of technology. And if you cannot do that, the very idea of technology loses all sensibility and logic and just becomes a random quest for prestige and power or something. It doesn't have any meaning anymore. There's no way to tell if a technology is good or bad once you can't define what that would mean. So consciousness takes on a new role it didn't have before, of distinguishing the beneficiary of technology from technology. That was not a problem. I mean, well, you can always argue these things, but I don't think in the same practical sense, it's never been a problem before recently. In a different sense, maybe it always has been, but I think in a practical sense, this is new.
Yeah, that in fact is a great, it's a very profound point you just made, Jaron. And I hope every technologist in the world is listening to you make that particular point, because it actually...
They listen. They all know. They know my opinion. Whether they agree is a different question. But yeah.
But it actually brings us right back to the planned program in this. But because you opened up such an interesting topic, we're just going to ask you one more question before coming back to this. And what's so tectonically different about this new wave of technologies. But when you were still talking about moving through time and different creatures, there are many transhumanists. Anders Sandberg is here. He's been talking about it. Many of your peers in the Silicon Valley are transhumanists. So do you then think that that's a perfectly logical position to have, that we are just transiting through this process of being a human being, and to become melded into machines is just a very plausible next destination?
I have a set of ideas about that, and it's a bit of a subtle set of ideas. So I'll try to address it as best I can. The first thing I want to say is that it's extremely important to make a distinction between being willing and being interested in very radical possibilities and transformations in the future, versus, or as distinguished from, wanting to make a transition that's so abrupt that you have no memory from the beginning to the end of the transition, and everything's different, and there's been no learning, and all memory's been lost. And now the reason I'm saying that is because within technical culture, there's great enthusiasm for this idea of the singularity. And a singularity is a very specific mathematical structure, which conceivably exists inside black holes, although we're not sure. And what it is it's an occurrence of an infinity that erases everything. So what happens before and after a singularity loses all memory. It's anti-learning, it's anti-growth, it's anti-knowledge. But this enthusiasm for it's kind of like a megalomania, like we are so important, we will transcend all of reality. Everything else other than what we're doing will be washed away because it doesn't matter. We will transform the universe. And you have this kind of crazy absolute egotism. And the problem there is that if you want to have change that's so radically fast that any kind of continuity or learning that transits through it is lost, essentially you're asking for nothing to happen. Like without continuity, there is nothing. The thing that comes after is meaningless, certainly meaningless to us now, but even to whatever that is at the time. It'll be contextless because we'll have wiped out its context. This might sound like a sort of an abstract idea, but it's really essential. So if you believe in any kind of context being related to meaning, even if you do it in a very materialist, anti-spiritual way, you have to believe that the radicalness of a destination has to be approached slowly enough that there can be a continuity of memory and learning along the way, and that very radical, rapid change is the enemy of learning. And this just seems to me to be so obvious. And so that is a critical distinction that is lost in technical conversations very frequently.
Right.
But okay, go ahead.
No. Finish your thought. It's just, I was just going to
All
say
right.
that being an interlocutor, I immediately start thinking what the adversarial position would be. And since there's no other technologist on stage who believes in this, I'm just presuming that their first thought to you would be to say that they are literally trying to escape the limitations of being human beings, and that if you do achieve a singularity, that's a whole new era of being. And there'll be a whole new set of concerns, and there's nothing to say that the moralities of being human beings, which really arise out of limitations, where you want to take care of others, or etc., the whole moral framework becomes irrelevant and meaningless in the first place. What's scary is that this kind of thinking actually is backward flowing into the way technology is being constructed in the here and now.
By the way, people who would believe the thing you just said are very, very common in Silicon Valley. You can go to any corner and throw a rock and you'll hit somebody who believes that. It's probably the most common belief. And once again, I would agree with everything you just said. And the point is that the very heart of any form of intelligence or meaning or learning has to be feedback and accumulating experience and being modified by the experience. And if you go through a transformation in which that's lost, what you have is absolutely irrelevant to anything. I should say this is not a new idea. You sometimes see revolutionaries who say, no, this is day zero, and everything from before is now forgotten. It happened in Cambodia, for instance. And I think it's...
No, it's with all arrogant leaders who believe time starts with them, so...
Yeah, it's a matter of absolute ego, and it inevitably turns out to be terribly cruel. And if you have an absolute faith that whatever new thing instead of people will be better, it's a faith. I mean, it's hard to argue with somebody's faith in their religion, but it is a kind of religious faith. It's a very dark and cynical and in a way hateful idea, in the sense that you're trading real people, the mother who bore you, the people who are your peers and your friends, you're trading them all away for a thing that's incomprehensible, that you cannot know.
Right.
Yeah, but I want to bring up another point, which is actually going to be more controversial. and here's what it is. It's very common in modern physics and in many other circles, and in religion historically, from ancient times to the present, to see consciousness as an element of the universe that's in everything, that there's a universal consciousness. This is one of the most common ideas of consciousness. I am of the opinion that while that idea has incredible appeal on many levels, and I absolutely recognize the beauty of it, if part of the role of consciousness is what I said before, that you need to identify that people are special if technology is going to make sense at all, because if you can't say that people are special, then who is technology for? The whole idea of technology becomes absolutely absurd. Therefore, you have to be able to, and this has to happen through faith. I have to say, this is not science anymore, but there has to be some method that's not replicable by technology for identifying the beneficiaries. And I think consciousness would be the clear one, but it's a type of consciousness that's no longer universal and global. Otherwise, once again, you can't identify the people. So that it becomes it's a more interesting, talking about consciousness becomes a little more interesting than it has been in the past in the context of technology.
Right. Jaron, I'm just going to segue away a little bit because just now, just talking to you and this last day has given one an idea that we should actually have consciousness conferences, because it's just such a fascinating facet. But interestingly, what you just said segued back and actually justifies the film we made. I was trying to clarify that that was really a kind of allegory of what you can't see, beneath the conveniences and the entertainments and etc. And these are ideas that you've put out, people as products, when you get something for free, who's really paying for it, so the underlayer of who's paying for it. And you said something right now which alarmed me, but which I feel intuitively, where you said that this idea that leave humanity behind and let technology be for technology's sake, and you said just throw one stone anywhere in Silicon Valley and it's going to hit somebody who actually has that belief. It actually then segues back to what we were showing, that why is technology having such a dark underlayer? They speak of abundance, you speak of efficiency, every single invention that is coming out of Silicon Valley, it's prefaced by we want to make the world a better place. We want to serve humanity. We want to create abundance. But there's not much sharing of that abundance, yes, there's a byproduct, which all of us, I'm talking to you on a Zoom screen. It's miraculous and it's wonderful. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Just for 1 minute, Jaron, and because I didn't get to share with the audience your uniqueness, because we were trying to rush between everyone settling down, I just wanted to share a couple of things with you all. One, you can see Jaron sort of, his background is full of instruments. He's a musicologist. He has more than 1,000 instruments. He's in love with Indian instruments. We were trying to get him here, and I hope he comes next year. But also, Jaron lost his mother when he was very young, 10 years old, in a car crash. So he grew up in a desert with a completely radical childhood, building geodesic domes, which collapsed 1 year later. He was trained in his intellectual capabilities by an astronomer he met in the desert. He put himself through college by, with goat cheese, that he was herding goats, and that's what, he used to pay for himself in college. He was barely 19 when he was already inventing virtual reality. And he, as I said, is part of the savants of Silicon Valley. Nobody gets to question him because he says, I know more than you do, and no one can question and call out his bullshit. So I just want us to know who we are speaking to, even if it's in virtual avatar.
That's very kind. That's extremely kind of you. I should warn you, there were a few details that were wrong, but I don't know if they're important. And
I think the age at which you discovered virtual reality was wrong. What age were you?
Well, that's, it's hard to nail it down. But yeah, no, actually, that's probably right. It doesn't matter. None of this matters too much.
Okay.
So look, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So now to come back to this, Jaron, I spoke of you like that because, there was a kind of hippie culture. There were the mavericks, the dropouts, who really created Silicon Valley in the first place. Now it absolutely represents corporate czarism, and again, not to take away any of the wonderfulness coming out of it. Can you tell us when did this shift, or how did it shift? And this thing that you're talking about.
And I do want to say I have a reputation for speaking darkly because I attempt to be honest and to talk about problems, but I don't think it's quite that simple. If we look at the last 20 or 30 years, we have seen a reduction in absolute poverty in the world in many areas that I think is due to a variety of things, but technology has been helpful. And I think we have seen uh, some improvements in public health and environmental quality and various things, obviously with also great setbacks, particularly in the environment at the highest level. But I don't think it's correct.
Jaron, I'm so sorry to cut you in. I'm so sorry. We're
Yeah.
really running out of time and haven't even begun to
Oh,
decipher.
okay.
So don't give the caveats because we've spent a lot of days, you know,
All right,
saying, and
okay,
as I
okay,
said,
okay. So I'll just get to the dark stuff.
Yeah,
I'll go to the bad
yeah.
stuff right away. I'll get you very, very upset. You have to be prepared.
I
because
also for clarity for myself, because there's some wonderful people from Google and,
right.
you know, I don't want to sound like we're trying to do down or be
Yeah,
blind to all the
Okay,
goodies.
okay. So look,
Let's
the
just
thing
take that for granted, you know. I'm talking about what's going wrong.
What I think went wrong was around the turn of the century, starting a little bit before and then going into a little bit after, there was a weird ideological problem, which is many of the original hippie-like people in Silicon Valley really wanted a sort of a socialist, communitarian, we'll all share, nobody will own anything. But at the same time, there was this intense desire for capitalism. We're going to be the super ultra rich, the richest people in the world, which happened. You know, we'll surpass the oil sheiks of the Middle East. We'll take over. But how do you have socialism and capitalism at the same time? And the way you do it is to lie. You tell people, well, here's your open system, share, it's for the good of everybody. But then in the background, the true customers, the ones who put money in to manipulate how the communication between people is routed and preferred and amplified and de-amplified, which messages get around. And those choices about routing become driven by the need to drive traffic more and more. So you have this attention economy, this attention forcing economy that is constantly trying to get people with the most basic fight or flight responses in the brain that do tend to work commercially to a spectacular degree. And yet they tend to bring out the worst in people as a side effect. You see a correlation of people becoming more irritable and tribal and vain and scared. And all of this happens in tandem with their exposure to these algorithms. So I think we have brought a lot of positivity to the world, but then taken away most of it through these algorithms. And what I would like very, very much is for my good friends and colleagues at Google and Meta and other companies to just get a different business plan. And I'm not anti-Google. I've sold Google a company. Like, I mean, part of me is at Google. Pardon my cough. I think what happened is you made me laugh so much that but anyway, so this is the problem. And so this started to happen a little more than 20 years ago. We have to overcome it. It's making the world insane. It's making politics crazier and crazier. It's causing people to feel that in order to exist, they need to get higher numbers online, and they get on this hamster wheel where they're posting and posting and posting and to get attention, and ultimately that doesn't work. So they have to start joining in to the process of being irritating and vain and paranoid and all the things that excite these dark parts of our brain for fight or flight. And we have to get out of that to survive. I mean, we can't keep doing it.
So, Jaron, this has to unfortunately be the last question. I didn't even begin to unpack all the stuff we had planned to speak with you, but it's been fascinating talking to you. I just wanted to say that, is there any thinking about what's the alternate business model? You know, because again, later in the day today, we have Tobias, Rose Stockwell, who's going to be speaking. He's a friend of Tristan Harris. They made the film Social Dilemma. It's not that the industry is not aware of these things. I think at the heart of it, what's happening is that the entire biology of our attention is being rewired and reprogrammed to serve a business model. You know, and we are participating, you know, to use a phrase I've really locked onto, we are participating in our own automation. We are also participating in our own subservience to a structure that is giving us plenty of goods. And I really want to keep saying that, plenty of goods, you know, wonderful stuff. But at the same time, like you said, it's hollowing out society as well. So you're a philosopher. What's the business model? And why does Microsoft keep you there when you're speaking so negatively about these things?
I have an arrangement with Microsoft where I can speak for myself as long as I'm clear I'm not speaking for them. And so far, I've gotten confused about that. I'm a little amazed they keep me around. I like them. Satya's great, actually. You know, I enjoy Microsoft, but I'm speaking strictly for myself. So look, there's a philosophy that's called data dignity. By the way, guess who made up that term? But Satya Nadella did. And data dignity is this idea that we.
Term? Sorry, I missed that.
Satya Nadella. He's the CEO of Microsoft.
Nadella. Yes.
Yes, you might have heard of him. Yeah. Okay. So look. Data dignity means that if somebody adds value online, they have an opportunity to fully participate as a first-class citizen related to that. If it's in a commercial context and somebody else can make money from it, so can they. They can get some kind of royalty. If it's not in a commercial context and somebody else gets some kind of influence, so can they. They share the influence. The idea is that instead of alienating people from their data, you celebrate it. Now, this works great for the concept of AI. Instead of thinking of the big AI systems like GPT or now Sora or these other things that we distribute, you know, and generate for people, instead of thinking of them as these entities, as these big alien brains, we can think of them as new forms of collaboration between people. Whenever you have a big AI program, you can think of it as a way that a bunch of people got together and their data was combined in a new useful way. And you can think of our algorithms that we call AI as actually finding all the hidden correlations between people's data, so that when somebody wants to do something that's been done a million times before, but not ever in exactly the same way, like a new program for a website, or for that matter now a new scene in a movie or something, they can draw on all the previous work by many people and save the time of having to start over from scratch each time. But you can acknowledge and remember the people the data came from. You can pay them royalties. You can create a new society where instead of being solely paid to be a direct generator of something, you're also paid for making the data that goes into AI models better and better. You can do it non-anonymously. You can do it with prestige. I think there's a whole new possible economy to imagine in which there are more and more creative classes of people contributing to all kinds of models for all kinds of things, rather than more and more people who are put out of work. I think this is possible. I think the math works out as well either way, but one of them is cruel and one of them is smart, which is acknowledging the real people who do the work. It's also much better for security. If you keep track of who did what, when an AI model does something, not only can you get people credited, paid, give them influence, give them dignity, but you can also keep track of when a bad actor did something. So like if a terrorist is trying to sneak something in with AI, you can trace it back and you know who did it. You know, so by getting rid of this anonymizing fetish that we have in order to pretend we have a big brain, we can actually make everything better. And that is the solution. That's where the future can be, and I really believe in that future.
That's a wonderful note to end on, Jaron. It's a completely radical idea, seems very doable. Certainly you have the brains for it. And just putting out something which is an alternative solution, because so far we've been deciphering it, generating fear, generating anxiety, generating exhilaration, but not an answer. You're giving us a sign of an answer. I'm glad it came out of Satya's head, but thank you very, very much.
Satya named it. Satya named it. I think I'm not speaking for him. For all I know, he'd be horrified by what I don't think he'd be horrified, but I don't speak for him. I don't speak for Microsoft. I just think it's cool that he came up with the name. I like that. Right. So I'm not speaking for Satya, let's be clear. But I do think it's a good idea, and I don't think it's radical. I think it's just common sense, and I think it's simple.
Thank you very, very much for joining us, Jaron. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I hope you
thanks
join
so
us.
much.
I hope you join us in person next year. Thank you very much.
I'd love to. All the warm.
Oops. Sorry, I've turned off your volume. Sorry, were you saying something?
Oh, I was just wishing everyone well and saying I hope the rest of the conference goes good, and I'm just sending you all the best possible wishes. That's all.
Thank you, Jaron.
Okay.